Welcome everyone to the annual student meeting of UPSU, and thank you all for coming. My name is Robert. I was elected by your Union Council as the chair for this meeting tonight. This meeting represents an opportunity for all members of UPSU to submit changes to the Union's governing document, the Memorandum and Articles of Association, or M&As if you prefer. There are several changes being presented this evening for your consideration and approval. Students are also able to propose policies which, if passed, will be binding for 2 years. There weren't any policies submitted prior to this date. As a charity, UPSU has a legal requirement to present our accounts to our members each year. There will also be reports from Union Council, the Accountability Board, and the Board of Trustees. The sabbatical officers will also give an update on their activities. This is an extremely fundamental opportunity of democracy for you to scrutinise the work of your students' union and check that it is indeed being run in your interests and representing the generality of the students. So do feel free to ask any questions of the trustees and student elected representatives. Before we get into it, I would like to run through some general information. This meeting is being recorded. If you could use the Q&A function to ask questions, this is moderated, so questions that aren't relevant will be deferred or they will be removed. Respect the opinions of others, their right to speak. If you do get involved in debate, question the issue and don't get personal. Any inappropriate language or behaviour will not be tolerated, and anyone being inappropriate or offensive will be removed from the meeting. All full members of UPSU can speak and vote on any issue. Any other people present may speak but cannot vote. All students are currently registered on a UOP course are full members of the union unless they have opted out in writing. This meeting will be conducted in accordance with the UPSU Memorandum and Articles, its laws, and any other relevant UPSU governing documents and policies. We are joined this evening by our very special guest, Jackie Weaver. Jackie is going to give a short introduction and then the floor will be opened to questions to her, which, as I've mentioned, if you'd use Q&A function to ask them, that would be excellent. So everyone, Jackie Weaver, if you would take the floor, please.
Thank you, Chief. First of all, it's a pleasure to be here with you this evening. One of the things that I have been very clear about since my meteoric rise to stardom just over a month ago was that I wanted to use this platform to reach out to younger people. And I guess you do get quite a few younger people in a university, so it's a really good place for me to be. I use the platform that I currently have to encourage people to get involved in local democracy. I prefer the term local democracy to local politics because I think that democracy is something that touches us in all walks of life and never more than you have seen laid out for you this evening by the chairman. I also feel very strongly that everyone has a part to play. And by that, I mean, it's not about everybody wanting to stand for election. It's not about everybody wanting to be a politician. And as your chairman spoke earlier this evening about, it's even about the important role that you play if you do no more than bear witness. And that is about turning up and making sure that things are done properly and giving your support. And that can be as valuable as standing for election or standing to be an officer. So I guess that I was further impressed by the fact that you are going to be make sure that your questions are mediated this evening. Again, a good example of just setting excellent standards when it comes to any form of engagement with people. And it's not a bad thing to start that as early as possible. As you've seen, unfortunately, it doesn't matter what age you are, you can still behave incredibly badly. So encouraging to see that it's something that Plymouth, we take it seriously. I'm mindful that you have, I hope, a lot of questions that you would like to ask this evening. So I propose to offer no more by way of introduction, but I am happy to hear your questions.
We've had nothing come through on the Q&A as yet, but
I wonder if in the meantime it might be helpful to offer just a little bit of background, Robert, in terms of why I do what I do. It's tempting to think that Jackie Weaver didn't exist before the beginning of February, but that clearly wasn't quite the case. And in fact, I've been involved with local councils, that's town and parish councils, for some 25 years. One of the difficulties we face, and I don't just mean me, I don't just mean Cheshire, it's something we have difficulty with across the whole country, is actually making people aware of what town and parish councils do. So we're actually kind of saying to people, get involved, but we're starting from a much lower base than that by having to tell people what we do and then why they might want to get involved. And I guess for me, one of the beauties of local councils or town and parish councils is that they are local by definition, that their power, their influence, their sphere of interest is no greater than their geographic footprint. They're a tax-raising body, but it means that every penny of tax that is raised by a town or parish council has to be spent in its area. And again, been very keen to try and encourage young people, and I kind of mean young people from 16 upwards perhaps, to get involved with their local council to help their council better understand what it is that young people need, because town and parish councils can deliver services for young people. But I think often we have very little understanding of what young people want, if in fact they don't want a skateboard park.
yes, I would say those sentiments are shared very much by the Students' Union here. It's about engagement and learning what the students' wishes are and how we can best implement those.
But of course, one of the challenges there is, of course, it has to be a two-way conversation.
Yes.
Because it's, as I said in my brief introduction, if people don't engage with you, then you are in fact talking to an empty room. And although, clearly you are representative because you are a student and you are at the university, your needs may be very different from the audience that you are trying to address. So participation is incredibly important and often very difficult to achieve.
Yeah. We've had a question come through for you, Jackie.
Excellent.
How have you coped with the fame that has come your way as a result of that meeting back in the beginning of February? And what might you do with it to further local and other democracies?
How I've coped with it has been a question that, and I don't devalue it for the frequency. It's a question I'm often asked, and in some ways, I guess it happens so quickly, and it is so incessant that you don't really have time to stop and take stock of it. I remember saying to my husband, when this is all over, remind me how much I enjoyed it, because it's kind of, as you're living it, you are so busy, you're not really noticing it. I mean, my diary, I also still work full time, is just so incredibly busy. It's where is the gap that I'm going to have lunch and tea in? So yeah, really busy. What do I want to do with it? I want to do what I've been trying to do with colleagues for 25 years, which is really encourage people to get involved, doing whatever, but just get involved with local democracy. I think that we've had a period of probably 15 to 20 years where people have felt less engaged with politics, party politics, and less able to influence politics and policy than ever before. And I think that's something that's really switched us off. And what I'm trying to say to people is, I don't know about that. I'm not a party political creature. I don't have particularly strong views on government policy. Some of them I like, some of them I don't like. But what I do know is that at local level, you most definitely can influence policy. And indeed, if you know, who better to influence the policy in a local area than the people who live there? But we still need to make that connection between the communities and their councils.
Excellent. Do you have any advice for young people who want to get involved with their local councils?
I think before I would offer advice, I would ask them why they want to get involved with their local councils. I think there are a number of reasons. I mean, whether they're good reasons or not, it's not for me to judge. I think people might get involved with their local council because they genuinely want to make a difference to the area they're in. And they may aspire to do no more than that. And that in itself is entirely worthwhile. But others do it as a means by which they will get a grounding, if you like, just like you're doing with the student union, in the kind of procedures and things that you come across in local politics. And sometimes they do it at town and parish council level because it gives you, one, it's easier to get a seat, and two, you don't need to go in under a party banner. So you can get involved before you've actually kind of nailed your colours to the mast. And it's often a very good grounding for people who do want to go on and have a political career. So it depends on why you're interested.
What are the benefits of being involved in a democracy locally and within a university?
I think you're better placed than I am to say what the benefits are about being involved in a democracy in a university. I mean, I'm sure nobody has noticed that I might be a year or two older than you. And it may have been some time since I've had much experience of being involved with a students' union or a university for that matter. But what are the advantages of being involved in a local council, in some form of local democracy? I think the advantage is huge. I think there are advantages for your community. I think the community benefits from having a diverse group of people who are in the council. I think the whole community benefits from that. But I think you as a person benefit from it. I think that it's again an ideal place to find. It's a bit corny to say it, but to find yourself. You know, a place where you take ideas, a place where you debate ideas, a place where you push for your ideas, and a place where you fail miserably and have to go with somebody else's ideas. But it's a kind of I think it brings lots of opportunities for personal development. And it definitely also brings opportunities for you to give to the community. So that seems like a win-win to me. But I'll have to leave the student union one to you.
As a previous deputy, this isn't me, by the way, I'm just saying the question of this as it's been, as a previous deputy mayor at the age of 19 in Devon, we attempted to run a youth council. Unfortunately, in our area, we found it difficult to get our youth engaged and involved. In a more national perspective, how would you suggest getting youth interested in their local parish councils?
Yeah. Congratulations on achieving mayorship at the tender age of 19. I think we had one in Cheshire who managed it by the 19th. So it shows that there is support from the local councils in being able to achieve that, because you can't do it on your own. And certainly in Cheshire, which is where my main experience comes from, we have had youth councils set up, youth parliaments set up, and they always felt disappointing. I kind of, when they first came on board, I thought they were going to be bright, shiny and new and something really different. And what they turned out to be were local councils. They were just mini-me's. They even dressed more like councillors. So it kind of felt like a complete failure, because all we'd done was kind of swap out the bodies, if you know what I mean. Nothing really changed. And certainly locally, my experience was that it really took an older member, an established member, to continue to drive the youth council or the youth parliament. And when they stepped back, it kind of chugged along for a little bit, but eventually stopped. So in my personal opinion, I don't think creating a similar construct and calling it youth council actually works. For me, I think it comes back to the fundamental point of what are they trying to achieve. And I think the bit that we missed when we set up these youth councils initially was that the end game was setting up the youth council. I think that's why they failed. And what we should be looking at is, what are we trying to achieve, and what is the best structure or mechanism for young people to help them achieve it. But they did look nice in suits.
Speaking of looking nice, the next question. Hi, you both look great this evening, and thank you very much for being here, Jackie. We work very hard in our student union to represent our students, but sometimes as a rep, I struggle to get engagement. What do you recommend I do to combat this?
I think first of all, again, take a step back. I know that seems counterintuitive when you're trying to get people and trying to engage with them, but take a step back and see whether or not what you're trying to do is realistic. You know, are you trying to engage with the right people over the wrong issues, or the wrong people over the right issues? Actually, maybe you are succeeding perfectly well. It's just that you set yourself some targets or some objectives that are perhaps not reasonable for the audience that you have. And really, consultation and engagement is about an offer. It's about making sure that people know how they can get involved, making sure that it's available if they want to do it. But then if they really don't want to engage, I guess that's about you being their representative. Because if you get it wrong, you'll get plenty of engagement, because they'll come and tell you.
Have you met with any discrimination in your position due to the ratio of male to female councillors? And do you have any advice on how to deal with these issues based on your personal or career-based experience?
I'm quite lucky in that there are very few people who do my job. And that often puts me in a position of relative power. Don't get me wrong, it's a very small pond, and I'm still a very small fish, but within that pond, I'm quite a large fish, if that makes sense. So I don't tend to get the same level of challenge that perhaps some women might do in different occupations. But I do know of other women who have had challenges, particularly younger female councillors on an older established, mainly male council. And I guess they report to me that the best advice they had was about not taking it personally. Now, that's a very easy thing to say, oh, don't take it personally. But there is a skill that can be learned in how you stop taking things personally. And for me, that's about focus. It's about making sure that you are very clear on what it is that you're trying to achieve. You know, a bit like your agenda for this evening, Robert. You know, what is the agenda item? What do I want to get out of this? And a bit like you saw in the video back in December, you know, often people say how, you know, how calm I appeared, etc. I was absolutely clear on what was going to be achieved that night. That meeting was going to happen. And everything else was noise. So that's how I do it. Focus on what it is that you're trying to achieve. Then it's not personal. It's about the job.
Well, that's the last of the questions for you. So thank you very much for being here. Thank you for that amazing insight as well.
You are very welcome.
Thank you for what you just said about chairing meetings. I'm sure that'll be very useful for me. If we now say goodbye to Jackie, of course you are welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting. If we go on to the notice of any other business, we have not received any. So we shall move on to the matters to discuss. There are 7 changes proposed in all. After each one, there will be a vote to approve that point. The voting in all of them shall be as follows. It will be votes for, votes against, and then any abstention. We will vote by the raise hand button on Zoom, which you can find in the participants window, which is down to the bottom left of your user interface. I would like to hand over to KC, who is the UPSU president and chair of the Board of Trustees, to explain the proposed changes to the memorandum and articles of association. KC.
Thank you, Chair. Hello, everybody. Hi. As you said, my name is Chukwudiko Sochukwueze. You can call me KC. And I first want to start while we still have Jackie here to say, extend more gratitude to you, Jackie, for the wealth of wisdom you've just shared with us there. It's very, very encouraging to hear such words. Thank you for that. Quickly, I'll be taking us through the proposed amendments to the UPSU Memorandum and Article of Association. Just on this slide here is an overview of this document and why it is that we're doing this change. So the changes to this document are being proposed to see that it's more flexible and the union is more student-led. That's why we've done the changes to this document. So I would like to take us now through the proposed changes. And the first one is student petition. So this was proposed by a councillor at the Union Council by councillors at Union Council for the number of signatures required within the student membership for student petitions to go through to be reduced from 400 to 1% of the student population, which would be a total of 184 students. So I'll just give you a few seconds to read through it, and we'll move on to the next one. Yes, so trustee type and student trustees. This was proposed. This one is just basically to move the numbers of external trustees from the articles to the bylaw. By doing this will give both the board and the Union Council power to make decisions on the number of external trustees to be on the board. Also to know that if this is being approved, we're looking to increase the number of student trustees on the trustee board from 2 to 4. The next one, yes, external trustee term limits. So this one is to give the Union Council more power to determine how long basically an external trustee can serve for. Also, adding to this, we're looking to reduce the current term time of the external trustees by 1 year. So it's going to be a maximum of 3 terms, and each term is 3 years. This is I'm sorry, guys, if this is really boring, but these are the things we need to do to ensure we're running a democratic union. So please do engage whilst it's going on. I'm sorry if it's boring. But yeah, the fourth one, removal of the trustees by Union Council. This is also to recognize power for the Union Council to be able to remove external trustees, since they are the ones that will be ratifying them to be part of the trustee board anyways. It really makes sense for them to be the ones to be able to remove them and not by referendum. Next, please. Yes, removal of student trustees. So similar to the one before this, is just to recognize that it will still be the Union Council to decide on the removal of student trustees. Before, this used to be the student body that would do this, as the student trustee position used to be elected upon before. But now it's been done by the Union Council. It only makes sense for the Union Council to still be the ones to be able to remove them. Next one, please. Yes. So the motion of no confidence. This is another reduction in number of signatures required for petitions to be moved for motion of no confidence, from the high number of 800 that it was before to 1% of the student membership. Still, the Board of Trustees thought that this was a very high number, and it was not helping democracy within the union to get students to move motions. Hence why the proposed reduction in number. And the last one. So yes, again, this is students' union governance committees. This is again about moving the list of committees from the memorandum and article of association to the bylaws. So again, the Board of Trustees and the Union Council can establish what committees would be required to run the student union properly. So these are the proposed amendments. Do we have any questions so far, please? I'm sorry if that was extra boring, but it's a necessity. So please, do we have any questions?
For the there's been a question asked, and for the benefit of everyone, 1% of the student population is 184.
Thank you for that.
That's great.
Any questions?
People are assimilating the information, coming up with them.
I understand there's a lot of information there to process through, so please take your time. And yeah, I'm happy if you're trying to understand it, because that's essentially what we need. So that you're the ones making these decisions.
Perhaps if anyone needs any of the motions repeated as well.
Yes, or explain a bit further, you can do so.
Why is the term for trustees 3 years?
Why is the term for trustees 3 years? Well, that's a proper technical question. I'll probably hand over to Anthony, our CEO, to give an answer to that question.
Thanks, Casey. Trustee positions in student unions, external trustee positions tend to attract longer terms, typically 3 or 4 years at a time, to provide continuity in a union where the officers change and the student trustees change on an annual basis. So it's just to provide that additional continuity for the board.
Thank you for that, Anthony.
Were there any specific events or reasons that prompted a proposed reduction in required student signatures for petitions?
There was no specific reason to that, as I was also a seconder to that policy. But it just came off of the idea of, we're trying to get a more democratic union. We want students, we've been saying we want more engagement from students. We want students to be more involved in decision making. So we thought that that number it was at before would be probably a difficult numbers to move motions if we always have to try to get 400 students to do that. So we thought it would make it more reasonable to reduce it to something that will be more achievable so students can be able to move things and faster.
Okay, it doesn't look like there's more questions coming through. So if we move to the vote on Amendment 1, which is the student petitions changing from 400 signatures to 1% of the student body, I will call for votes for, then votes against, then abstentions. If you could vote by the raise hand option in the participants window of Zoom, that would be good, because that's how we're voting. Thank you, Casey, for that.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, everyone. I would just like to say to endear us to please do support this proposed amendment for a more democratic union, for the students to have more power, for your elected reps to have more power within them. But yeah, thank you.
So, votes for this amendment. Votes in favour of changing the required signatures for a referendum from 400 to 1% of the student population. Has everyone found the raise hand button? Looks like that's everyone. If you could all lower your hands. Cool. If we go to votes against, if you would all raise your hands. You could all lower your hands. Yes, a reminder, all full student members are eligible to vote. And any abstentions, please raise your hand. Okay. Thank you. If you would lower your hands. If we move on to the voting of the second amendment, trustee type and student trustees. All those in favour of this amendment, do please raise your hand. Okay. If you could lower your hands. Votes against this amendment, please raise your hands. If you could lower your hands. And any abstentions on this? Thank you. If you could lower your hands. Moving on to Amendment 3, maximum term of trustees that can serve. All those in favour, please raise your hand. And while your votes are being counted, I'm going to go turn my light on because I look like a vampire. There we go. If you would all lower your hands. Those against, please raise your hands. Okay. You could lower your hands. And any abstentions on that? Thank you. You could lower your hands. So moving on to Amendment 4, external trustees and student trustees being removed by that body and not by a referendum of students. If those in favour could raise their hands, please. You would lower your hands. All those against? You could lower your hands. And any abstention? Cool. If you would lower your hands. Thank you. So moving on to number 5. External student trustees appointed by the Board of Trustees must be able to be removed by the board. All those in favour? Oh, Jackie. Excellent. If you could lower your hands. All those against, please raise your hand. Thank you. If you would lower your hands. And if there are any abstentions on this point. Thank you. If you can lower your hands. So, on to number 6, nearly there. This proposal seeks to reduce the number of signatures required to trigger a motion of no confidence in an elected officer from 800 to 1% of the membership, which is currently 184. All those in favour? If you could lower your hands. All those against? If you could lower your hands. And any abstention? Thank you. If you could lower your hands. And then final one, number 7, list of mandatory SU committees to be moved from the Memorandum and Articles of Association to the bylaws. This will allow the Board of Trustees, with agreement from the Union Council, to create whichever committees are necessary to properly govern the SU. All those in favour? If you would lower your hands. All those against? If you could lower your hands, and any abstention? Thank you. If you could lower your hands. Excellent. Well, that's all the amendments. I would remind everyone that while that's the end of the motions for this meeting, any student can submit an idea for a amendment or policy through the Student Voice Department or via the relevant elected representative on the Union Council, who will then motion it and will vote on it at Union Council on your behalf. We're moving on to the Accounts and Finance report. So I would call on the SU's interim chief executive, Anthony Blackshaw. He will present the finance presentation, and then he will be here to answer any questions you may have for him. So, Anthony, do please take the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening to everybody. As Robert said, I'm Anthony. I'm the interim chief executive. I have been here since the beginning of October. I'm sorry that this is also going to be very dull, but I hope we'll make it as short and as interesting as we possibly can. It is a requirement constitutionally for us that we bring the financial affairs of the Union to the attention of all members. And there's some information here in terms of the basis upon which we operate in our governance. We are a registered charity and a company limited by guarantee. And it's important to note and remember that the 4 elected sabbatical officers are full members of the trustee board, and together with the 4 external trustees and currently 2 student trustees, they make up the trustee board, and the chief executive reports and is accountable to that trustee board. We've slimmed down the information contained in the trustees report and financial statements of the student union, which is a 46-page document available to you on the website to look at those in full. Down into a presentation that hopefully explains some of the key headlines in relation to our finances. I should say that we have deliberately, because this meeting is much later in the year than would be normally the case because of COVID, what we've done is we've taken the opportunity not only to report on last year's formal final financial accounts, but also to talk about where we are up in the year that we're currently in as well. So hopefully that will be of value. So in terms of the year ending the 31st of July 2020, the headline figures are that our total income from all sources was 4.9 million and our total expenditure was 5.4 million. Now that would suggest that we made a loss of about £500,000. It is slightly more complicated than that, as we'll explain in a little while, because included in that figure is a figure of approximately £900,000 worth of additional pension deficits, which are required to be shown on our accounts. And I'll explain those when we get to that part of the report. In fact, if we look at the year, the Students' Union actually recorded what we call an operating surplus of 323,000. Although that does include, just for complication, £178,000 that were received as additional block grant for kitchen works. So those are the headline figures for last year. Breaking that down a little bit, just so that people understand, that income comes from 2 principal sources in normal years, which is the charitable activity, essentially our trading activities and associated activities, and the block grant that we received from the university. Because we were in lockdown and because we closed in March, at the end of March last year, and the last 3 months of the year, last 4 months of the year, sorry, we were not trading and not able to function. The block grant this year represents a much higher proportion of our total income than would be normal, and we'll show that figure in a graph in a second. In this graph, the other income of 251,000 that's shown on there was from COVID, from the COVID CJRS, the furlough scheme, the government's furlough scheme that we have received for closed services with staff on furlough. Moving on from there, this graph shows how the union's income has gone over a substantial period of time, and it's interesting to note the income that we've received on the purple bars are the income that we generate ourselves, And as you can see, in recent years up to 2019, that had stabilized at a figure around 3.6, 3.7 million, which is really substantial. That obviously in the 2020 year, as you can see, that dropped quite substantially by over £1 million, and that reflects the fact that we were not trading from the end of March. The block grant, the blue bar, you can see that the block grant has continued to rise, although in recent years it has been more static. And remember that figure for last year, as we've already pointed out, that 2205 includes this additional payment for support for kitchen works. Does not represent an increase in the base block grant, which actually fell because our block grant is linked directly to student numbers, and student numbers in the university fell last year, and therefore we received less block grant. We are told that the university is expecting an uplift of around 6% in student intake in the coming year, and therefore we will receive a small uplift in our block grant to match that. So that's what the income is. What do we spend our money on? These are the areas. The total spend, you must have, unfortunately, the total spend does include pension deficits. So rather than talk about the amount that's actually spent in each area, we're showing a percentage spend this year. Obviously, running the commercial services, it's not all income. We have to show all of the expenditure, the cost of sales, and the staffing for that area, and that's 40% of our expenditure. Representation takes a further 26%. Sports and societies, including restricted money which belongs directly to the clubs and societies, accounts for another 26%. Welfare, 4%, which includes the advice service. Volunteering and community, 3%, and then governance, a further 1% of the money that we spend in the union. Some more history, our financial journey, if we have a look at the first of these slides, please. So this is to show our reserves. It is clear that the Students' Union over the last 10 years or so has done a fantastic job of ensuring that it had buffers and reserves to meet its outgoings and recognising the need it had to make sure that it could protect itself against the vagaries of the future. We couldn't have possibly predicted COVID, but it's turned out to be very useful. The current year, the 2020 year, shows the highest reserves figure of all so far. However, if we move on to the next slide, this figure does not include the pension adjustments. This slide gives the overall picture for the student union. Now, this is slightly complex because the red bars are the level of pension deficit, which are required to be shown on the face of our accounts because of the way that the accounting standards apply. There's no suggestion that £2 million that we have in deficit on the pension has to be paid off in a single go. We have a programme to repay that money over the next 15 years. Now, that is still not an unsubstantial amount of money that needs to be repaid every year. And the trustees are currently revising the reserves policy of the student union to reflect the need to ensure that we always have enough in reserves to be at least a year ahead on the pension payments, to make sure that we never get ourselves into difficulty in terms of repaying that pension. In a normal year, the pension payments are included in our standard profit and loss account. So you can see that the union did a great job of building its reserves up to the point at which the pension had to be listed, and you can see then that we stayed ahead. This year, the reason the pension deficit has increased by £1 million is not anything to do with us as a student union. It is to do with an administrative problem that arose during a recent check of the scheme. It meant that every single union in the scheme was subject to additional deficits that had to be added to that, and therefore that's where we're at. But at the minute, our reserves are strong enough, and although this year, and as we've said in the report, the fact that we have been closed for large chunks of the year and when we have been operating, there have been substantially fewer students available on campus to use the services, means that we are projecting a loss this year, which, even though we're taking maximum use of the furlough scheme again, we are projecting approximately a £200,000 drop on the P&L this year, because of unavoidable loss of income. We are losing well over £1.5 million pounds worth of income because of loss of sales. So that's the headlines. I know those are hard to take in, and I see there's some questions coming in which I will take and help hopefully add some clarity as I answer those questions. But we'll move on. So just really to summarize it, last year saw us continue to build reserves, but because of this substantial increase in the pension liability means that at the end of the year the balance sheet is in deficit for the first time in many years. It's minus £382,000. But as I say, that is not money that we have to repay. There is no, there's no immediate requirement for us to repay that. We have a repayment schedule over the next 15 years, as do every single student union in the pension scheme. However, as we've said, the impact of COVID-19 and our closure on the current year means that some of those reserves are going to have to be used to meet the shortfall in income that we've had to put up with this year. I hope that's useful. I see some questions. I should wait for the chair to ask me those questions.
Muted. Yeah, I'm just waiting for the questions to come through on my chat. Is the sharp drop in incoming funds during 2020 the reason the SU decided to take on large sponsorship deals this year at the expense of overall student experience?
Those two things are unconnected. I hope everyone has seen that we have engaged very directly with the concerns that students have raised, and particularly through council, in relation to the issues relating to sponsorship deals. And in particular, I'm not going to name names, it would be inappropriate at this place, but a particular long-term relationship with an accommodation provider, which we listened very closely to council, and we got ourselves extricated from that agreement. And we continue to work with council and the feedback we get from council to make sure that what the student union is doing meets the demands of the students. And that's not, we would not. The idea is we would not use that way of softening the shortfall. We will take entirely appropriate and I would hope ethical responses to help us through that difficulty. As I say, the reserves are comfortable, are able to cope with that.
Why has the union allowed such a large pension deficit to happen?
So the pension deficit is nothing to do with the student union, just to be absolutely clear. It is a deficit of the pension scheme, which we are simply one employer. There are the majority of student unions in the UK were individual members of that student union superannuation scheme, and in common with almost all final salary pension schemes, under the rules set down by the bodies that regulate this, there is a requirement to identify what the funding ratio of those schemes are, and if the scheme falls below a particular funding ratio, it's deemed to be in deficit. Our scheme is closed to entrants. Nobody can join that scheme, but we are still dealing with the historic fallout of the fact that there is a scheme which simply could not keep up with life expectancies increasing out of all expectations of when the scheme was set up, and so people are living a lot longer even though they're not working as long. And of course, when these schemes started, interest rates were very high, up to as high as 15%, which meant that pension funds made enormous amounts of money just by simply having big pots of money. We now live in a very low interest economy, which means that those schemes are flat and cannot keep up with inflation. That means the deficit has continued to increase on schemes. We continue to pay those schemes off. It will end, but it's nothing to do with the student union. It's nothing to do with any decision that was taken internally at all, other than being part of the pension scheme, which we are no longer in.
As the situation with coronavirus improves, will UPSU consider how it could adjust its existing business aspects, for example, the SU shop, to make these business aspects COVID secure and enable them to operate in a potential future where we're yo-yoing in and out of restrictions?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. We're looking at all aspects. One of the things, there are many lessons that have been learned as a result of COVID, but certainly one of them is we have to think about future proofing and how we would deal with these things so that in future, even beyond this pandemic, it's about what can we do and how would we do it to make sure that we can continue to operate whatever the operating scenario that we find ourselves in, whether it be after Easter or even when we come back in September. So yes, absolutely.
With this being the second year of loss, what will change in the future which will make the SU viable in the future? The previous year was not a pandemic influenced year, so this trend cannot be entirely attributed to the pandemic.
So so for clarity, when we talk about the loss that was made last year, if you had been looking at the management accounts throughout the year, the actual operating, the students' union made an operating surplus last year. The reason we show a deficit on the accounts is simply because of the huge increase that we got hit with, this £900,000 that we got hit with in terms of the pension. So in terms of the sustainable viability of the student union, last year was a very good year, extremely good year for the student union financially. This year will be, there's no question that this year we will not break even this year. We will have to use some of those reserves to cover that shortfall. But there's no suggestion that that's a trend that will be affecting the future. And in fact, there is an expectation that once we are back to normal, that certainly the economy is expecting a bounce back, and I think we would expect that too. There are a lot of people who have simply not had a proper student social experience this year at all, and the first years that will be arriving will also have been in lockdown or unable to socialise for a large part of the year. And I think we are expecting next year to be substantial. We're looking at how we can build additional capacity and support to enable particularly the activities and student-led activities to flourish to meet that demand next year. I think we are sustainable. I hope that the graphs that show the way that the union has built those reserves up over time show that it has been a sustainable model now for some time, and we would expect that to continue.
Will loss of income negatively affect the provision of financial support for clubs and societies in the next academic year? No.
The intention is that there's an absolute line ruled off, and I think we're all very clear on this from this is a clarity in the board and throughout the senior management. This year is a one-off year. We continue to work with the university to identify whether the university will support us through this difficult stage. But not surprisingly, I think they are taking the view that we have got reserves, and therefore the union can stand on its own 2 feet. And I think you should as members of that of the union, be very proud of the work that's been done in the past to make sure that position is sustainable and is strong. But no, the next year's budgets will be based on an operation that stands on its own 2 feet and will not have that. It will not have any carryover from this year at all.
At what point did the SU sign up to the pension scheme? £2 million liability seems large for such a small SU.
Yes. So this is the problem here is that most student unions signed up to the pension scheme in the 1980s. And at that time, lots of student unions, including ourselves, were running substantial commercial operations with substantial staff, full-time permanent staff, which meant that everybody was in the pension scheme. It was a very expensive pension scheme. We now have far fewer staff in those areas because of the way that the market has gone. So it does look odd now, and this is true for I do interim. I should explain. I'm a professional student union interim. I've worked with 11 student unions in the last 10 years, and most of them have been in similar or worse situations. It's unfortunately a measure of how large we were at the time we joined the scheme rather than how large we are now. And I completely agree. It looks like a horrific amount of money to be facing. As I say, it does have to be read in the light of that works out at about £140,000 a year that we have to find to repay, and that is within the margins of our expectations of surplus from our commercial trading activities at the moment. And whilst that continues to be the case, then the block grant will be used exclusively for student activities and student representation, and not to have to meet the shortfall on the pension that will come from our commercial surplus. Whether we can guarantee that for the whole of the 15 years is challenging, and we will continue to work on that. But yeah, it's a huge amount of money, and for those people who didn't live through that period, it's a situation facing. I mean, if I tell you that the university's equivalent scheme is 17 billion in arrears currently, that is still open to people. People can still join that scheme, and it's running the USS scheme, the University Superannuation Scheme, is running a deficit of 17 billion at the minute.
Yeah. I'll leave Q&A open for another minute in case there's any last questions. Okay. Well, thank you, Anthony.
Thank you.
That's all right. We're waving. Right. So moving on to the affiliate section. This is a requirement of the 1994 Education Act that affiliations are presented on an annual basis. The affiliation cost to the National Students' Union ceased on the 1st of January 2020, and other items are listed in the subscriptions and memberships to sector voter services. So we just need a show of hands to ratify the subscriptions and membership section. The full accounts of those can be found online in the page that Andrew mentioned in his presentation. So if those wishing to ratify these could raise their hands. These affiliations, they're things like training services, support services, sector guidance, things like that. And this is just a ratification vote. So this is basically to say that these accounts that you can see on your screen are a kind of true reflection of the truth, the actuality of the accounts. It's not a vote in favour for anything or against anything. We'll leave voting open for a few more seconds. Okay, if you could lower your hands. And we shall move on to, well, before that, just a reminder that all the accounts and subscriptions and memberships can be found online on the SU website. Moving on to the reports. We've got a report from the Board of Trustees, so I will hand back over to KC to introduce this, and then he shall be open to questions about it.
Thank you, Lincoln. Going into the trustees reports, we'll be looking at the last 12 months. The last 12 months have been filled with a lot of COVID challenges, I'll say, for everyone. And of course, the SU has not been excluded from this. I remember very clearly, I know St. Patrick's Day last year was my last day in the office officially with my team. And after that, I go into the new life of working from home. Just during that period of the first lockdown, we seen the departure of our long-term CEO, Gina Connelly, who's been with us. And we've seen the arrival and as well the departure again of another CEO, Sarah Gibson, before we had our current interim CEO, Anthony, join us in October. Of course, Anthony has given a lot of detailed information on our financial position at the moment, but just to point out that, COVID still continues to impact our financial position at the moment, and we're not taking it lightheartedly. We're working constantly to ensure that we are, that the union is able to function financially in its own side. Like Anthony pointed out, one thing that's seemed like it's challenge to us, it's that point of the pension deficit, but it's something like he said, the trustees are continuously working on to improve. But on a positive note, the UPSU we've adapted quickly to working online now, from running our trustee meetings, our union council meetings. I'm sure we have some councillors here in the house. Our union council meetings, the advice center, all these have been running all via online, via Zoom and Teams, and we've been doing it successfully. We've also done some interesting online activities like the Q&A session with key university senior staff members, which was exciting to see, which has been exciting to see. Also, we're already making plans that once the government ease restrictions, we're making plans on reopening and what things will be like for the future. Part of what the Board of Trustees are also currently looking into is the recruitment of the new permanent chief executive, who should join us by the beginning of the next academic session. But so far, this is what this the last 12 months have been about. This is what this year has been about for us. It's just the summary of it all. I believe we've seen the bigger report, so I'm happy to take questions at this point if we do have any, please. I hope it's all clear to us. Do we have questions? Please, if you do have questions, let's fill them in and we'll be happy to answer. I personally will be happy to answer questions with regards to anything in the report. Well, in the meantime, I'm happy to hand over back to the chair to continue, or if you have questions for the chair, to do direct the questions accordingly.
I'll give it one more minute for the questions. Why are we paying NUS services membership if we've disaffiliated from NUS? Obviously, we could you can bring Anthony in as well if you.
Oh yes, that question is. I think that question was there from Anthony's presentation. So yes, Anthony, I'm happy for Anthony to come in to take the question.
Thank you. Yes, the question related to the affiliations. That NUS services membership, which is a very low figure, it enables the student union, despite not being a member of NUS and not paying the NUS affiliation fee, to benefit from the discounted prices that NUS managed to negotiate for their members. It is a tiny amount compared to the discounts which are available, and it just provides the commercial team the opportunity to benefit from those discounted prices. I hope that's okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony. If there's no questions come in, so shall we move on?
Thank you, Chair.
That's all right. I am going to have to hand over to my deputy for this bit. I introduce the very lovely Owain.
And it is my pleasure to hand directly back, because not only is Robert the prestigious chair of the all student meeting tonight, he's also got the pleasure of chairing the Union Council, of which he's written a report which is the record for the shortest report of anything written for tonight. But nonetheless, it is very worth listening to him, because all of the policies that you've engaged with your reps over that have passed through Union Council, Robert had the pleasure of overseeing them, and we'll detail a little bit about the work they've been doing now.
Yes, hello. I'm also Union Council Chair. So the Union Council is the legislative body of the SU. We make, or rather the elected officers make policies which are binding for 2 years, and the sabbatical officers then have the duty of enacting them. This year, we have passed 6 policies now. In my report, it says 3, but as of the meeting last week, we passed another 3. So we've additionally passed a policy on UPSU communications, on student representation, and a training template for the SU for course reps and academic representatives. And that's the kind of thing that does really make me proud of this council, as I've detailed in my report again. This council has really pulled it out when it comes to making positive changes for the students. I know that the policy they worked on have been more detailed and have had a bigger and better defined scope than anything that has gone before. And they, in addition to writing policies, the councillors, they do podcasts, they do forums, they do focus groups, they overview policies for the university, things like the academic policy that the sabbatical officers had a part in, and the well-being of study policy that we had a focus group on, and they do so much more than just talk to students and then vote on stuff. And I think it's important to mark that duty as the council. Where was I going with that? Yes, they've also been taking part in the Democratic Review, which is a annual oversight of the, not oversight, annual overseeing of the mechanisms that enact our democracy. It's things like is the Union Council the best? It's how do we represent students best? And they've been taking part in that. They've given very, very detailed feedback towards that, and they are just, it's all for the students, and this council has really made it clear that they are fighting to make it the students' union. And as our manager of the student voice team, Tracy, always says, look at where the apostrophe is, and that'll tell you whose union it is. The union of the students. It's made up of us, even me as the elected chair. It is made up of us, and we need to use it to that advantage. That's it, I'm done.
So with your ramblings, there have been no questions yet, which is either a really, really good thing or a really, really bad one, because you've put everyone to sleep. So we'll give people a minute to ask anything of you, because you get the best job on the council. You just get to watch what everyone else does.
Oh, I did, yeah.
So nobody's picking up on you so far. So you might have gotten away scot-free. Oh, never mind. I spoke too soon. What? Oh, never. What, Robert, why are you the best chair of all time? Thanks, Will. I think it's the frosted tips and the mullet, personally.
Yeah.
That's the man.
I mean, what other chair in the history of this union council could pull off frosted tips and a mullet?
Don't start that. Don't. That will just get us in trouble. But that's everything. So well done, Rob. You got away scot-free. You can transform back into the annual student meeting chair now, and I'm going to disappear.
Bye, Owen. Isn't he great? Right, so moving on to the report from the chair of the Accountability Board, Alex.
Yeah.
You have the floor.
Brilliant. Thank you, Rob. So I was elected back in September, October, I can't remember whichever one the month the elections were in, to the chair of the Accountability Board. Since then, the board has endeavoured to fill the points of our manifestos that we were elected on, and to fill the role and the purpose of the board in itself, which is that of the disciplinary advisory board of the Union Council. When I stepped into the role, I found that, as I did before I heard about the role, I hadn't heard about the board at all, and barely about of Union Council. And so some of the things that we want to do is try and help publicise, well, both the board and council. So the Accountability Board is there to scrutinise both the elected officers and the student-led meetings that are done with the student union, to help ensure that they are being fair and representative as they could possibly be, and to essentially make sure that the elected students who are there, who you've elected, are doing the jobs and are being fair to everyone who's there to speak. And so our role as a board breaks down into 4 key areas, essentially. This is to hold meetings with the sabbatical officers and make sure they're doing their jobs right. observing and scrutinising representatives-led meetings, such as forums, to make sure that they stay democratic, that members of the community are being represented and are being listened to and treated fairly. Observing Union Council to make sure the decisions are made fair and representative. So that's making sure recommendations about the most appropriate course of action, and suggesting as well when the council is steering off course from their intended discussion points. Assessing policies and submitted by students and making sure they're being progressed upon as well. Within the board, I, as chair of the board, have the added responsibility of attending Union Council to monitor the debate, make sure it's fair and unbiased, and, like I said before, to make sure it's not going off track, and to investigate any allegations of misconduct or unfair bias decision making made by the elected representatives that you, the student body, have elected, and to closely work with the Union Council Chair, Rob, to identify and chase action points arising from Union Council. I think I should point out the board, it should go without saying, believes completely in the democratic principles the student union runs on and is beholden to, because, I mean, democracy. And to that extent, we have, as well as having supported the chair of Union Council and its members, we've worked thoroughly to the achievement of our manifesto points which we were elected on. So this was to ensure the democratic election that takes place according to the new bylaws that were set out. So this is because of COVID, we came into the time of having to do the SAB elections online, and so the Accountability Board was there just to, we engaged with Student Voice to make sure the rules are fair, essentially, and to publicise why the roles of publicise why the sabbatical roles of society and sports VPs merged into activities, and to essentially ease student worry at this, because we had heard from me a lot, and to publicise both the board and the council. I think we've done great on our manifesto points. We have publicised why the roles of society and sports were merged by the trustee board, and that has, I have been told, calmed student fears and student worry from the two particular groups, supports and societies, as to why that happened. The board is essentially the tool for keeping your elected officials in mind. I think of it as a carrot and a stick. We haven't had to use the stick. Hopefully we will never have to use the stick. And we just use a lot of carrot, which is essentially praising your elected officials who have been doing a great job. This year, I have had the privilege to work alongside some great elected reps. Some of the best that I've seen since I came to university 3 years ago, and and they are brilliant. They have dedication that goes well and beyond. They were elected in the time of COVID and academic upheaval, and considering that, I think they've all done absolutely brilliantly. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. And yes, it has been a pleasure to work alongside you. If we now go on, to questions to Alex as the chair of the Accountability Board.
So they are published. They're published somewhere on the Student Union website. I don't know off the top of my head. Sorry, I know Rob was meant to ask me that question before I read it. But I can Google it and find out for you in 30 seconds.
They are, even if you just Google UPSU Union Council, it'll come up. There's lists of all the elected representatives, school reps, sabbatical officers, the policies we've enacted, and there we go. Thank you, Tracy. UPSU.com, student voice /representative /union council. So all the minutes are there, details of policies that we passed are there. as well as the governing bylaws are also on the UPSU website. Any further questions? Give it.
Well, it's for questions. I just thought I'd say, reiterating once again, your elected officials this year, both the SABs and part-time officers and the school reps and your course reps, have done great jobs. I think they've gone above and beyond this year, especially in times of COVID, where it has been unprecedentedly weird. I think that's the right word to use. No one quite knew what the year was going to be like, and I think the fact that they put themselves forward for the role, let alone did the role, has done the, they've let alone they've done the role as admirably and great as they have, bodes well for the student body and the student union in the future.
My sentiments exactly. Given there's no questions, I am happy to move on to the sabbatical officer reports. Thank you, Alex. So, if I could call upon again, KC, President of UPSU.
Yes, happy to be here again. Right, just to go through a few of my my points that, or a few of the things I've been working on so far this year. I believe and I hope most of us have read the full document, the full report that's been shared prior to this. But yeah, like I said, just to point out a few. So with regards to the first one, there is postgrad and international students engagement. So with regards to that, like I said, it's with regards to the aspect of postgrads, whilst in my first year of my sabbatical role last year, I realized that, you know, postgrad engagement is something that we've been struggling with as an FCU, and it's something that I've put myself out to say I want to see to increase the engagement with postgrads and the FCU. Last year I tried to organize a postgrad talk session to let them know how we can support them more and find out what they want from us. We did that last year. We got somewhere with that in the sense that we started some sort of communication we established a communication strategy with the doctoral board, since they do communicate with PGR students by themselves. So they will let us know when they want to put out communications to them, and we give them information that will be useful to these students. But of course, COVID came in the way and disrupted that plan, as it was just something that was starting newly. But I've decided to revisit again to continue to try and increase the engagement with regards to postgrads. Myself and VP Education, Emmy, we've met with faculty reps in the postgrad session, in the postgrad school, and they've come to us with brilliant ideas. It's delighting to see that they themselves do also want to engage with the SU. They also accept that they don't know what the SU could do for them, and they also have means that they would like to support the SU with as well from their own aspect, like helping creating some sort of putting something in place to support students who would like to transit from, say, undergrad or master's course to PGR courses. So we're continuing with that currently, and we'll keep you updated with that as we work on that. The next one was something that I also picked up from my last year being a sabbatical officer, which is getting more representation on university committee meetings. These meetings are where decisions are being made for us from the university aspect with regards to about students generally. And I felt it would be more useful. Whenever we're at these meetings, they tend to look at just the SABs to get student views, but I believe we can have more students who are enthusiastic about being involved. So why not we use these students to get more views on student views generally? So at the beginning of my term, I had a meeting with the academic registrar, who I start with. She did enjoy the idea, and we listed out the list of committee meetings there in the university that was shared to student voice manager Tracy, who then supported me to to appropriate which part-time officers or which students will best fit for what meetings. So I'm happy that's progressing, and I hope it will continue that way. The third one was the meeting that we had, the Zoom call we had with Luke. This was as a result of an email we sent to him then due to, back in January, due to the numerous challenges the students were facing at that time. And we needed some sort of support from the government because we were trying to look at we were going after the university for support, but a lot of things they'll say to us, they'll say has come from. So we thought it would take upon ourselves to reach out to them. We had a sabbatical team, reached out to Luke and other MPs as well. Luke responded to us saying that he was appreciative of that, saying he's looking to organize a Zoom call for students generally within his constituency, which he did. Students were there and poured out their hearts to him with their challenges that they face. He took it up, said he was going to do something about it. I also followed him up with an email to know how far he has gone with that. And he responded to me with his letter that he did send to Gavin Williamson about the issues that students on this side are facing. So hopefully we believe that will be progressed. I'm still going to be chasing him up to know the progression of that. But this leads me on to my last one here, uniting students in the city and the city council. This is something that I had in mind from the beginning of this academic session, and it's just, I see Plymouth as a student-dominated city. So I believe the students in the city, the students should have more involvement with the ongoings of the city. Hence why I had this idea in mind to have sort of like a big town hall group. So we have the city council and the student council meeting, something you call regularly to decide on things and, you know, carry the students along with things that are going on in the city. Because like I said, it's a student-dominated city. And the bigger picture of this is that I shared this idea with the CEO who gave me even more knowledge on it. And we looked to see that we have other student unions as well who we work with well in the city, being Marjon's student union and PCA. So we've involved them in this. We're going to have a three-way union meeting together, sabbatical meeting together to continue this plan and approach the council with this. But so far, these are the few points I just wanted to point out from my reports. I believe, like I said, we've all read the report, so please, I'm happy to take questions on anything regarding to that. Thank you very much.
There we go. Again, any questions for Casey?
I feel like the people in this picture have questions. Just gives me that feeling like they're raising their hands at me. Anyways. I think I have a question. Oh no, sorry, it was just a message to me.
Here we go. Having been in the role of president for coming up to 12 months now, you've listed student engagement as a win. Having less than 30 students in this very meeting, would you still call it a win?
First of all, I didn't say student engagement was a win. I did say the opposite of that, actually, with regards to some particular student groups. I never said it was a win, per se. But you saying that we're having this year, of course, I wouldn't say we did not expect this so far, because like we said, students are facing a lot of challenges now. We did not see it fit to put so much pressure, in as much as this is very important for them to be part of, but we did not see it fit to put so much pressure on them, combining the pressures they have already, for them to force them to say you have to be here in this meeting with regards to engagement in this meeting. But no, I didn't say student engagement has been a win this year. I said it's something that needs to continually be worked on.
Anything more?
I hope I clarified that for who asked the question.
Okay, well, I'm happy to move on. Thank you, Casey.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So I will now call Emmy Dowse, Vice President of Education.
Hi, Robert. Thank you for calling me up. So I'll start by saying that I've got a lot of updates, but I've just narrowed it down to my top 4. But when I ran for VP Education, I did it on the belief that for students to succeed within their academic studies, they need to be supported in every walk of their student life, so not just their education. So you'll see that some of my points don't necessarily relate to education, but it will definitely impact their education. With that being said, one of my manifesto points was about accessibility, and it was specifically about having backgrounds a pale or a pastel color. And I've noticed that tonight we don't have that. I did bring it up with the people creating the presentation, but I think there's been an error. So what they've said, they're going to send out a colored version. So if anyone does need that accessible version, that will be sent out. But I'll get on to my first point, and that was about extenuating circumstances. So this I'm really passionate about, and it's about making the extenuating circumstances more accessible about some of the issues that students were facing. And I'm really happy to say that I have been really successful in doing this manifesto point. So I've been on a extenuating circumstances policy review board, and we've managed to get some issues which might not affect all students, but have a significant effect on some students to be included. So these are things like people can submit extenuating circumstances for terror attacks or natural disasters or any extreme form of event in their home country or their hometown. So even if it doesn't happen in Plymouth or doesn't happen to themselves, which I think is really good. And another one is about if a friend or a family member gets into an accident or a serious illness, then they can also submit extenuating circumstances. And these are 2 big things that came up when I was doing my campaigning last year about students saying that they needed that to be included. So that's great. My next thing is about the safety net. The safety net has been probably the biggest topic that I've been working on this year. It's been ongoing since November. And I've been lobbying the university on students' behalf to implement a safety net. This has been something that I've really tried to collaborate and make sure I get as many students' voices heard as possible, because not every student wants the same thing. And it's still ongoing. I would have to say, I know that some people are not happy with what's been done so far, and all I would say is it's still ongoing, and I will always continue to update people as we go, so not just tonight. My third point is about clever studentlets, and that's about representing students' views on clever studentlets. So over the summer, we had a lot of people put forward their concerns about clever studentlets, about their housing. And what I did was I took this and took it to clever studentlets directly, took your concerns, and we worked on this. I worked on it with their previous CEO and their current CEO to improve things for you students. And it ultimately led to us ending our partnership mutually with them, but that doesn't mean that we won't continue to advocate on your behalf for any housing company, not just CSL. If students have an issue, we will definitely take it up. And this is one of the examples where I was saying, it's not just education, but it will impact your education. And the final one is the buddy scheme. So this is something that I wanted to create because I wasn't able to do my life skills seminars, and also because I knew that loneliness would be a big issue this year. So we've created a very simple scheme where students can buddy up. Students in first year can buddy up with students in older years. Now, currently it's a very basic scheme because we just wanted to make sure it was sustainable, but I hope to continue on with this next year and to continue growing it and making it more effective. So they're my main updates. Please do ask me questions. And if you do have any questions after tonight, feel free to email me.
Thank you, Emmy. Any questions for Emmy? And of course, echoing what she just said, if you have any questions or issues for any of the sabbatical officers or elected representatives, do feel free to get in touch via university email. Any questions? The buddy scheme has a cut-off in mid-November. Why?
Yeah, so that's not 100% true. It was true at the time, and the main reason for that is it was very new, and we didn't want to take on too many buddies and too many students, because we wanted to make sure that those students who did sign up were completely supported. And that means that when we can take on more students, it will be more sustainable, so we don't just burn off straight away. So it has opened up and closed since, and it will probably continue to for the end of the year. And we hope to make it so it can be continuous throughout the whole year for all students. But up until we get it to a point where we can support all students who sign up effectively, we do have to cut it off, because we don't want to have some people half supported, if that makes sense.
What advice would you give to your successor about being an effective VP?
I think the best advice I would give is to really listen to what students want. It sometimes may be different to what you think it is, and also that means sometimes going out to them in different ways and making sure that you're not just going to the same people who always ask. But I would also say just try and work your best not to let the uni put their views on you, but make sure you're sharing the student views, because sometimes it can be quite difficult in that sense.
Okay. Give it a little bit longer, and then we'll... Okay, well, I'm happy to move on to Verity, VP for Activities.
Hello, hi everyone. Thank you, Robert. So yeah, hi. I'm actually really pleased to be here tonight, and I'm really excited to present some of the work that I've been able to do this year. So what I will say is that with my role, I find myself doing lots of little things rather than big projects. So picking 4 things for me was actually really tricky. So I would encourage you to go back through my update to read some of the other things that I've been doing that are maybe equally as important. But to start off with funding and facilities, I know this crops up every year in activities, sports societies, SABs manifesto, because it is so important to the students they represent. Obviously, with the changes due to COVID, this has been shaped and warped all year. I would say one of the successes that I've achieved from this year was demonstrating the need of our societies to the university. I know the uni are aware of what sports facilities we need, but actually some of our societies do need specialist rooms. And with COVID, this became very limited. And it was a massive win when I was able to present the case on behalf of societies to the university, and they were able to give us different rooms at different times, which was fantastic. And I hope this will carry on when we can restart back up. I'll definitely be checking in with that. Also, I've managed to build a relationship with the Director of Estates this year. I think this is going to be a relationship which will be really good in the future. He wants to know what students want on campus, what we're lacking, and my main viewpoint is that all these changes to academic buildings and campus developments, they're encouraging students to come to campus, but we're not looking after our students when they're on campus. So it's just building a relationship with him so that we can work some things through. Some ideas that we've discussed are more studio spaces for yoga and mindfulness, and also some sensory rooms and some quiet rooms. My second point is mental well-being. I know this is so important and crops up in almost everyone's manifesto as well. I've been liaising with the university to continue our wellbeing advocate scheme. This is a scheme where students in clubs and societies have access to training, which allows them to signpost and look after their members. So this training has been continuing, and I'm really pleased to say that I had over 50 wellbeing advocates this year in sports and societies, even with everything going on with COVID. I was able to extend the training on offer. I worked with our advice centre to produce an SU specialised training session on what our advice centre can offer and how you deal with information, and the feedback for that was really valuable. And we're also looking, staff from our student voice department is hopefully going to be able to deliver bystander training, which I'm really keen to get our clubs and societies involved with. And also picking up on one of the campaigns I ran last year, I've had connections with the Harbour who deal with alcohol and substance misuse, and just bringing that training into our clubs and societies, which was planned, but obviously with COVID, things got difficult, but I'm going to hopefully bring that back in. So with the Faculty of Health, I lead the Faculty of Health. I'm the lead representative for here. This means that I work with the school reps and course reps and listen to them and represent their views in meetings where it's not possible for them. One of the great things that has come out of the work is a policy for webcam usage. With everything going online, it's been a really difficult time for students and staff. How should we use Zoom? How should we use Teams? And in the Faculty of Health, this has been extremely challenging due to professionalism. So it's been great to work with the staff and get our school reps involved in a policy which is going to be underway. I've also been able to build on the relationship that I've had with staff in the faculty. I've met with staff from courses that have only been running 2 years, helped them and their course reps relay information between one another and just facilitate those conversations, which have been really positive. And also placements in the Faculty of Health this year have been majorly disruptive, so it's being there to support those students, and Emmy and I have been running some focus groups to really try and pinpoint where the issues are within placements in the faculty. And my final point, as part of my role, I put myself forward to be elected as the Southwest Region representative within Bucks, which I was delighted to take on. And this has meant that I've had about 4 or 5 national meetings where I sit and be the voice for students in the Southwest. This has helped me build relationships more than I ever imagined. So not only with staff throughout the Southwest, but also students from England, Scotland and Wales. We've been able to discuss issues even outside of sport. So we've spoken about engaging our students. How can we look after our students? Even if our sports clubs want to do Zoom sessions, how can we make it actually beneficial and maybe not always to do with sport? It's also given me a direct route into voicing about money and changes, which is really important for our union, obviously, with sustainability moving forward. And actually this week, I feel it's really relevant to update. I was actually invited to a call for action to sit on a working group for transgender and non-binary inclusivity within campus in general and sport and sporting facilities, which I'm really delighted for. I think that's it for those points, but like I said, please do have a read of everything else. There's so much more that I would love to talk about, but we don't have time for this evening. So thank you.
Any questions for Verity? We are slightly overrunning, so do get them in quickly.
Thank you.
Okay, well, again, I'm happy to move on to Fawzi. So thank you, Verity. You're muted, Fawzi.
I'm so sorry. Hi, everyone. Thank you, Robert, and thank you, everyone, for being here tonight. So I've worked on here. And any questions, please feel free to send me an email or send me a message, as well as read my full report. So one of the things I've worked on this year is celebrating diversity. So last year, in October and November, I led the campaign for Black History Month and Disability History Month. Due to restrictions, most of the events were virtual, but I collaborated with student groups, and we hosted events collaboratively, ranging from open forums to virtual cook-alongs to watch parties. For LGBTQ+ month, November, International Women's Day, I ran a digital campaign which essentially focused on sharing posts which created awareness of those months. And one of the things I'm most excited about, which I'm currently working on, is the #BeAnAlly campaign, which is focused on sharing tips and creating awareness of some microaggressions faced by some marginalized groups, such as BAME, people with disabilities, LGBTQ+, Muslim, and women. And the main aim of this campaign is to create awareness of some of the prejudice that students, that people and students face in our community, and also to create awareness of the Speak Up too. The next point is wellbeing forums. So was one of my main manifesto points when I ran last year, and it was to make wellbeing forums as regular as sports and society forums. So these forums are essentially an open space for students to talk about anything related to wellbeing, and also for students to provide feedback of the support services. I have hosted a total of 4 wellbeing forums. Although engagement isn't as much as I would have wanted it to be, the students that attend have told me that it's quite useful, and the feedback, they pass on feedback, which I then pass on to the support services. So the most recent wellbeing forum I held was on the 24th of February 2021, and I got in touch with one of the school reps in the Faculty of Arts, Humanity and Business. So the attendance was better than the previous wellbeing forum, and some of the feedback was on the theme of the accessibility of the websites, how the support services are advertised, as well as the possibility of implementing wellbeing champions. And some students also shared their experiences of using some of the support services, which other students found very useful. So before the school year ends, I'm looking to host a few more, and the university as well is looking to collaborate to host a few more feedback/wellbeing forums. My next point is the Access, Progress and Participation Plan. So this is one of the projects that the university is working towards, and it's focused on improving the access, progress and participation of underrepresented groups such as BAME, students with disabilities, mature students, as well as students from low income backgrounds. So as part of the Office for Students review, I am the lead nominated representative for the student submission as part of the OFS review, which is focused on holding the university accountable for the promises and activities they said they were going to do on for those underrepresented groups, and in terms of access, participation, and progress. So for the submission, I'm working closely with the Director of Student Experience in the SU, and we're looking to put together a survey based on the activities that the university have said they have put together for those students. So essentially, we will be holding the university accountable for the promises they made. And the last thing I'm just going to briefly talk about is the rent rebate campaign. So at the beginning of the lockdown this year, many students were unable to access their accommodation as a result of government restriction. So I raised this issue in several university meetings, such as our meeting with the Vice Chancellor and the Student Life Committee. As a team, we wrote a letter to the Plymouth MPs urging them to lobby the university as well as private landlords to offer some form of financial relief during the period of lockdown. I also put together a private landlord toolkit for students renting with private landlords, which contained tips and information on how to rent during this pandemic. It also contained template letters that the students could write to their MPs and also their private landlords. So the university made the decision to offer a 50% rebate for the period between 8th January to 8th March. As a team, we do recognize that there are still some students up until this point who have still not been able to access their rooms beyond the 8th of March, and we are still continuing to raise this this issue with the university, and we've raised up with our meeting with the Vice Chancellor. So as a team, we'll continue to work, and I'll continue to provide updates regarding rent. So thank you. That's all from me. I'm happy to answer any questions anyone might have.
Give it a few more seconds. Well, again, I'm happy to move on.
Thank you.
Thank you, Fozy. Yeah, we didn't have any other business, so we can move on from that. And I will call the meeting to a close. Thank you all for coming. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for your engagement, and have a good evening.